extra episode of Arenda Talks. For the next 4 weeks, I will make each week an extra episode with the recaps of the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Spoiler alert. If you don't want to know what is in the episode or about Strange New World, please listen to this episode after you have watched the episode. I will post this episode on Wednesday, just before the next episode will appear on the streaming services. This to avoid spoilers. This episode sees the Enterprise embarks on a cartography mission to the Magellan system, a star cluster on the edge of the Federation space that Pike himself once visited a decade earlier as part of a rescue attempt. But when the crew answered a distress call from the Magellan ship under attack, he reunited with an old flame, and his crew find themselves changed with protecting an important child from a kidnapping plot. Though the Magellans were offered Federation membership, they declined, preferring to keep their own customs and ways private. It turns out there's a really obvious reason they might want to do this. But I guess then Lieutenant Pike was too busy falling for the pretty young girl named Alora to ask a lot of questions about how her society was structured and or what weird sacrifice-based ritual they might have. Alora, now a Magellan leader in her own right, oversees a being known as the Reverse Servant, a holy child chosen by lottery to embody the maxim of their people: sign service, sacrifice. True, no one is ever too specific about what exactly any of that means. According to the Magellans, the first servant imminent ascensions will usher in a new era for their planet and allow them to continue to live the way they do, complete with luxury floating cities and highly advanced medicine. Given the constant googly eyes she and Pike make at each other whenever they are in the same room, it's clear he is not super interested in what any of this really involved on a larger cultural scale. It's amazing it takes the two until the episode's midpoint to hook up. So guys, my first reaction on this episode is that I really loved it. It was a very heavy themed one. But first, my first comment is, what the hell did they do with Pike's hair? He looks like Johnny Bravo now. And there are a lot of pictures now on social media with Pike as Johnny Bravo. That's very funny, by the way. I'd like to start with the relationship between Pike and Alora. And Alora is the leader of the Magellans. And the Magellans have a little bit of a... how can you say this? It's like a little bit of a barbarian social gathering in the way of offering children. And although it's a gruesome subject, till today there are still tribes on this world that's still offering children. So it is quite a heavy subject to have in a episode. But Aduma reminds me of the lessons what Gene Roddenberry did into TOS. So there was also a bad scene between Allura and Pike. What was very, in a way, romantic, how he was lying at her feet like that. But it reminds me of Kirk. And I don't know why, but it had that same vibe. And people who know me as a tracker, I don't really like Captain Kirk in that way. So, and although Riker, you could compare Riker with Kirk in a way of the ladies' man. But, yeah, it was a little weird. And so Pike and Allura meet after 10 years, and 10 years before that, Pike was a lieutenant. And so it was very weird that Allura would call him lieutenant. And she was right away flirty to him because she was saying like, well, your new uniform is very yellowish. And Pike became almost giddy as like a schoolgirl. And one thing was really, how can I say this? It was really weird in the way of how he introduced Una to Allura. And so in one way it wasn't a surprise that they hook up again and they share the bed. But to be honest, at the moment that we see that scene, I was thinking this is really like a Kirk vibe, and I have expected more of Pike. And later on, in one of the conversations he had with Allura, he just mentioned again that he has seen the future. And that's something, well, about in 10 years or even longer, he would have a freak accident and he will be in so much pain, and the doctors couldn't do anything for him. And, well, Allura was saying, well, if you were a Majorian, you could have stayed with us, and we have the technology for it. So, in one way, the Magellans were very knowledgeable of healing, etc. And you could see that to the doctor and the little boy. Little boy was very smart, by the way, but I will come to that later. So let's start a little bit in the end of the beginning of the episode. And Pike meets Uhura in the turbolift, and she was stretching a little bit and etc. And Pike was a little asked her what was going on. She said, well, the aunt's teaching or security, and Pike immediately was amused about that because he knew how La'an was with teaching, etc. Once again, and that was very funny, I had a very funny thought about that, when they talked about the rules of security. I really was thinking, okay, yeah, that would be typical for a red shirt. They always die. They have those rules, so yeah, why not? And so Pike was a little bit amused, and he was winding her up with, well, you have learned lesson 1, but you have to be careful with lesson 7. And Uhura was like, what the hell is lesson 7? And Pike shut his mouth up with a invisible key. And then they arrived on the bridge, and Laurent's immediately comment was, well, very nice for you, Cadet, to join us. Did you enjoy your break? And she got exactly lesson 2, and apparently it sounds almost like every cadet have to learn those lessons of security, cause Ortega answered, well, lesson 2 is there will be no break for security because there always is a threat. So they came to the bridge, and once again Pike is calling Ortega at her first name, and I'm wondering why that is, because she is the only one Pike called at her first name. And it's really weird. And so the Enterprise had a emergency call from a small ship, and they needed a system because an other ship was firing on them. So it was a shuttle, by the way. So Pike said immediately, okay, let's defend them and beam the survivors of the shuttle over so we can talk to them, how about ever. And the big ship was then firing three times at the Enterprise and wanted to escape. So Pike said, well, use the tractor beam to hold them in place before they go to warp. And to their shock, the ship wanted to go to warp, and just after Pike said, well, just release them, the ship exploded. And it was very shocking and to see what happened. So Pike said, well, let's welcome our new guests on the Enterprise. So Una and he went to the transporter room. And by surprise, it was Alora and a little boy and a somewhat older man. And they had a conversation, and Pike has been introduced to the small boy and the father, who was also a very well-known good doctor. The father brought the child to the sick bay to check on something, etc. And it appears that boy is very enhanced with, how you can say it. He's like an augment. And I don't know how you can say this, but he was very advanced in everything. And when Nurse Chapel and Mbanga were talking to him, etc., it was clear that the boy knew a lot more than they thought, and that their health or their doctors were more evolved than what they were. And this reminds me a little bit of how it goes nowadays with doctors, the regular doctors and stuff, but okay. So Nurse Chapel wanted to scan him, and his father said, well, don't do that, he's the first servant, etc., etc., etc. Meanwhile, Alora was explaining to Pike and his team what the first servant is. And she did that in a monotone voice that I was thinking, are you a robot? Or an android? Because this isn't what you should tell about in the way she did. You could also see why the father was that overprotective of his son, because in the Magellan society, the first servant was picked like in a lottery, and that reminds me exactly like in that movies with Cats, District 13. What was it? What was the name? I know the one. I have to figure it out again. The two last movies called The Mockingbird. Oh gosh, what was the name of it? Alright, I will get that later too. So, once again, Pike was a little bit of crazy child love with Allura. You could see that. And there was exactly a bond between them that, yeah, you could see they had a lot of fun when they met last time. So, Spock, La'an, and Uhura were going to check on the wreckage because by following Starfleet guidelines, they need to do a investigation what happened. And Allura was saying, no, you don't have to do that. We are not members of Starfleet. And, well, Pike and Uhura made her clear, well, it's going to be investigated because we have been firing upon us and we weren't a threat. So, Spock, La'an, and Uhura went down to the wreckage, and after La'an and Uhura was checking the wreckage of Hostility, they call in Spock and Allura. And of course, La'an gave Uhura again security lessons. Well, not really funny, but okay. So they were looking in the wreckage, and Spock found this little device. It looks like a brain scanner or like a brain enhancer, whatever what it was. And he was asking that of Allura if she knew what this was, and she said no. Then Allura found this coin in the wreckage, and that was a ode from the bodyguards of the first servant. Then there was a scene that we see Magellan. Well, Magellan was very colorful, very well, I like to compare it with Naboo, cause it is that colorful, that's cheerful, celebration, etc., etc. And so after that, there was a ceremony of the gods, and Allura asked them to renew their vows of for the first servant, and this was Pike was with her because Pike had offered her to be her bodyguard for the ceremony, etc. So he was there, and Allura asked the gods to present their coins to renew their vows. And one of the guards didn't have his coin on the right place, and she said, what happened? And he was just nonchalant. Well, just nothing important, but it is just. He didn't say that he lost it, but they assume it, and because Alora found it, she knew exactly that he was like a spy, so, or a traitor. So he was attacking her, and the guards were protecting her. So they were running after him, and the weird thing it was they fought with him for a little bit. And Pike was holding him in shot, and he said, well, the phaser isn't on stunt, so he knew it was shoot to kill. And Alora came between them. I said, okay, we just want to talk with you. What happened? And in one move, he got Alora and he held a knife to her throat. And by everyone's surprise, she fought him and she killed him. And Pike's face was like, okay, what just happened? This isn't what's supposed to be. Why? How can she fight? Etc. Etc. Why does she? If she can fight like that, why does she need me as a bodyguard? So, meanwhile, Spock was sharing his findings with Elder Garmo, who also is the father's boy and the doctor of the boy, and the child was very smart, and he was talking to Spock with, oh, you're the scientist officer here, and do you know about this and this radio frequency, etc., etc., etc. And he told him that he did some things, and I think Spock was very impressed. And that was very funny to see, because Spock wouldn't be impressed that easily. Then Spock, or the father said, well, the child needs his rest, so excuse me. And the next scene was that Uhura had a quick meal in, and Sam Kirk came to her table and said, whoa, 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 Cadet, you're eating so fast, and well, tell on you to save a full hour break instead of what she normally does. But La'an stood behind him and says, well, you can tell me that self. And Kirk was like, nah, I don't want to come between you, but you have to be a little bit nicer to the cadet. La'an sat next to her, had also a little bite, but she also had a box with discs with her from the wreckage. And La'an was a little bit intimidate her with the message of, well, I need to translate this, but if I do that illegally, then it can cost me weeks, even months. And you're good with language, so you do it. What I was thinking, oh damn, La'an, you're so evil and wicked again. And I don't want to square, but okay. It's like, yeah. Can you be a little bit nicer? And smile once in a while? But okay, I didn't like her attitude. And we see that a lot of La'an acting like that. And in one way I think it's because how her life was. But I do think if she losing up, then she would be a lot nicer and will be a lot lovable than we know her. So Mbenga also had this conversation with the doctor of the father of the boy, from doctor to the doctor, and because Mbenga is still searching for a cure for his daughter, he was asking this to the doctor of, okay, can those quantum bioimplants help my daughter or help this patient, because I do like to help her, etc., etc. And the first servant overheard that talk, so that boy was so clever. That boy was so clever, and the actor itself, I think he's a really lovable kid, and he acted so well for his age also, and it's so he is really a professional. Really, he did. The boy, when Mbenga and his father were away, he was looking for this bio patron, and he found out that she was in the transporter buffer, from the medical transporter buffer, and so he wake her up and tried to play with her, what was really sweet to see, really sweet to see. So the next scene is that Chris and Aurora, or well, Chris was walking Aurora to her room, and he was very concerned of her, of course, what happened, and he said, well, I'm going to station security in here, and she was seducing him and saying, well, you don't have to, because you could stay with me. And after that, she kissed Pike. And of course, they spent the night together, and like I said in the beginning of this episode, it was very beautiful to see in how the scene was. But I didn't think Pike like that, because we all know he also have a girlfriend, but maybe not. Maybe it's just like, I don't want to say a one night stand, but you know, guys, what I mean. And I just expected a little bit more of him, how he would be like a man and how he would is like a lover. And maybe I romanticize him, and maybe his how can I say this, his tragedy, what will be in the future, maybe he's keeping that in mind, and that will influence him of not committing to one woman. But okay, that's what I saw, and maybe, like I said, maybe I romanticize it. I do have a lot of love stories for him to write, so who knows, there will be a fan fiction that I will write about his love. So, yeah, Ahura had done her job very well, because she translated those discs, and of course La'an thought the bad thing about it, and she told Ahura, well, you did that, but you took the easiest way. And Ahura said, well, no, I didn't, because I also translated the root of the language, etc., etc. And the language is more that of the Bajirans than anyone else, so it's like a colony of the Bajirans. And later we find out that those people who were shooting on the Enterprise and wanted to kidnap the first servant, they were 3 Bajirans that wanted to stop the kidnapping and children sacrifices of Majoras. And I think we can't imagine how that is, that a whole society happiness and wealth and everything else more is depending on a child sacrifice. It's ridiculous. So, Laan, well, let me tell you this first. I'm getting very tired of Laan's attitude. Really, I do. But, okay, that's it. And, so, when Laan saw what it was, she said, well, we have to notify the captain because this is important. And so Uhura responds, okay, let me know what the captain found out, etc., etc. And Laan looked at her and said, no, cadet, this is your work. You have to present it to the captain, not me. And once again, we see Laan being very true and rightful and justifiable for in what she says and what she does. And I think that is one thing I do like about her, because she don't like injustice, but will fight for what is right. So they called for Pike, and Pike said, okay, why do I need to be here, and I want to stay with Allura because Allura needs protection. When Una told him, well, we found something, and I don't think this has to be with Allura's meddling. So they tell him what they found out, and Pike thought, well, this is a mistake that can't be true, and what the hell's going on? And that was also the moment that you got that feeling of, okay, this is something wrong, and Pike is going to be hurt at the end. What happened? When there was after that a scene with M'Benga that he would had some dinner for this first servant, and the first servant was playing with his daughter. And so also the father was there and said, okay, we're leaving. And it was Uhura who found out why those people want to kidnap the first servant. And that also means that Allura, it was her people's idea to kidnap the first servant so he can fulfill his duties to Magellan. So the father and the first servant run away, and they want to beam down or beam over to the other ship. And Una and Pike just caught them in time. And the father of the boy ordered Pike to order Chief Cal to beam them over. And before Pike could react on that, the child and the father beamed over to the ship, and Pike ordered immediately, what the hell is going on? Beam them back. And only the father beamed back over. So where was the little boy? So Pike said to Una, scan for ships nearby, and there was a ship. Then they wanted to contain the ship with the warp of the tractor beam of the Enterprise. And before that happened, that they could do, the ship explode, and everyone thought that the boy was dead. But the father beamed him back to the Enterprise in a secure place. And the boy, who was so very clever, sent a radio SOS to Spock. And Spock found out where the boy was. And Pike was immediately saying, okay, guys, how the hell can somebody beam someone out of the ship? That is a no done deal. Uhura was the one again who would explain to them how the cruiser could beam the boy on board. And that was because the father had put his and the boy's energy pattern, which is used to in the medical lab and also for transporting. He put that into the system of the Enterprise so he could beam them down or beam them over. And it was all because the father of the boy wanted to save his son. The boy sent a distress signal to Spock, and they found him right in time. And so the first servant said, oh no, I have to go down, the ceremony is beginning and I have to ascend, etc, etc, etc. And Pike was invited to be at that ceremony. Normally no outsiders could be there, but because he saved the boy and bring the boy back, he was invited. To be honest, I wouldn't be liking to be in his shoes right now. And Alora never told him about her ways, or her people's ways. So, the boy and some of the guards and priests and Pike and Alora went to the secret chamber. And Una can't get hold of Pike, and she said, well, we need to get him back because there are some developments. And there are some of the things she had, or the father's boy told her what would happen, and that was a child sacrifice, a child offer. So Pike went together with them to that offer, and Alora asked the boy, are you willingly to sacrifice yourself for the people? And he said, yes, I'm willing. Then there was like a little stretcher with a child on it, and that child was just totally sucked the life out. And it reminds me a little bit of the mummies of Egypt, like how they balsam their dead. And the boy was scared. You could see that. And when Pike was hit by the realization what's gonna happen, he tried almighty to save the child and stop the ceremony. But they overmastered him and they hit him unconscious. So they brought him to Alora's chamber, and she waited for him to wake up. And he was horrified, really horrified. So now he knew what really happens, and she had hoped that he would stay, and he said, well, you really think I'm gonna stay after what I'm seeing and what you have done? You're his damn godmother. Our mother never would do that. And Pike beamed over as soon as he could. And Alora was very emotional and was crying, etc., etc., because she had hoped Pike would stay there and become her lover and become one of them. But Pike was horrified and was very, well, I think he was very angry with himself that he could see you fall for it again. You fall in love again. she manipulated you, etc. And the first thing he would do was tell Starfleet about this. And I think, and that was the downside of it. This episode, I think they wrote it very good. And I'm really hoping for more good episode than this. And although it was maybe a little bit of heavy subject in it, but also there was a side note of, you could see how it is for cadets to go on rotations of departments to see and to find out what is suitable for them. And yeah, it's just like I said, it's so I must say I did like the Magellan City. Like I said before, it's like Naboo. It was very colorful, very celebrational, very beautiful buildings. But it reminds me right away about Star Wars. It is nice to see that M'Benga has a more stronger role in this episode than in the past episode. So, but I'm very curious about more about Nurse Chapel, because I think she knows more than the average nurse. And I didn't know what about her little joke when she talked to the little boy. And yeah, I think overall this episode was very good, and I would give it a 8. So let me know, guys, what you think about this episode. I really love to hear your comments. And well, I will see you next week with a new recap. Dear listeners, thank you for listening, and join me next week for a new extra episode of Orenda Talks in the Star Trek series. You can listen and subscribe to Orenda Talks on the YouTube channel or join the Facebook group. If you'd like to comment or talk with me about this episode, you can reach out on the Facebook group or the YouTube channel. I'd like also tell you about my other podcast called Girls Talking Trek. Together with my co-host Amanda, we recap every 2 weeks a Star Trek episode, starting with Star Trek TNG. All the episodes will be recapping chronologically following. We will approach each episode with humor and a feminine look. Girls Talking Trek is to listen, follow, and subscribe on Anchor, Google Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, the Facebook group, and the YouTube channel. See you next week.